Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to another tank review. This time a review that's been a long time in the making. This is the M24 Chaffee. I was planning to make this review ages ago, but then they changed the tank and removed its bobblehead, and so I couldn't really do it. And then I just didn't really get round to it again for some time, and by the time I'm actually recording this, since I was originally planning to do this video, I think the Chaffee has gone through about 2 or 3 different iterations. Anyway, as ever, just going to kick off with a little bit of history for you. Essentially, combat performance of the Stuart had shown that the tank was lacking in a couple of different areas, notably armour and firepower. The tank still used a 37mm gun, which had been considered adequate for anti-tank duties in the pre-war scenario, but throughout the course of the Second World War, tanks had been getting bigger, with bigger guns and better armour, and the 37mm gun just didn't cut it anymore. So the Americans decided they needed to have a replacement for the Stuart, which mounted a 75mm gun. Now, there was development of a light tank project at the time, which would ultimately become the M7. However, that project was increasing in weight over and over and over again, until eventually it was no longer classified as a medium tank and was classified as a no longer classified as a light tank even, and ended up being classified as a medium tank before not even being introduced. And the M7 never really left the drawing board, and this, the M24 Chaffee, is effectively what resulted from that requirement to replace the Stuart. And actually, although this is no longer in service with its primary operators, there are some places in the world that still use the M24 Chaffee. Might be a little bit surprising, but there we go. So, what do we have in game? Well, this is the American, or perhaps I should rephrase, at the time of me recording this, this is one of 2 American Tier 5 light tanks. The other one being the M7, that was originally in the game as a medium tank, because ultimately that is what it was classed as, though the original design had been for a light tank. So we're here at Tier 5. It perhaps logically follows on from the M5 Stuarts and is a significant improvement over these tanks. So let's actually have a look at the different qualities that the M24 Chaffee brings to the field. We're going to have a look at the gun in a little bit more detail in a moment. But, bearing in mind this is a light tank, as you would expect of a light tank, the armour, while better than the M5 Stuarts, is terrible. 25mm at the front, 25 at the sides, and 19 at the rear, my apologies. And 38 on the front of the turret, 25 on the sides, and 25 on the rear. That's not really going to be stopping anything. It might stop some low caliber high explosive, and that's about it. 360 hit points, again, that's not a huge amount, but remember, this is a Tier 5 light tank. Tier 5 medium tanks tend to clock in at around the 450 mark. Heavy tanks, over 600, but for a light tank, 360 is around about par for the course. Mobility-wise, well, this tank has a 27.19 horsepower to ton specific ratio, which is very respectable. And when you combine that with the ground resistance values, whilst this tank isn't the best accelerating light tank in the world, it's pretty, accelerates fairly well. 62 km/h top speed limit, 21 reverse. Again, those values are not the best in the world, but they're perfectly good. 45 degree per second traverse speed on it. Camouflage values, it's a light tank, they're pretty good. Again with the Chaffee, not the best in the world, but pretty decent. I mean, the M24 Chaffee, for all you can say about it, it's not the smallest light tank in the world. It's not huge, but it's not the smallest. In terms of spotting, rather, well, 360 meter view range. It's better than a lot of Tier 5 medium tanks, to be fair to it, but it's still not absolutely fantastic. And so if you're going to be wanting to get the most out of this view range, you're going to be needing either a very skilled crew and not be afraid to use a food consumable, or you're going to be wanting to use binocular telescopes on this tank. So let's have a quick look at the gun selection. You get 2 guns on this tank. And the difference between these 2 guns, honestly, is fairly small. They're both 75mm guns. We've got the M6 and the M17, 75mm guns, and they both remind one very much of the M3 gun on the M3 Lee. Their accuracy is not fantastic. Their shell velocity sucks. Penetration, not great. Alpha damage, okay. But as on a tier 5 light tank, to be honest with you, they get the job done. They're good enough. So the stock gun, 75mm gun, 12.5 rounds per minute rate of fire, 96 penetration, 110 alpha damage, 0.42 dispersion at 100 meters, which is god awful, and a 2-second aim time. With APCR, the penetration jumps up to 143, and if you fire high explosive, you get a pretty standard 175 average damage and 38 penetration. If you compare that with the top gun, you get an increase to your rate of fire, which is good. It goes from 12.5 to 13.6. Your aim time comes down from 2 seconds to 1.6, which is also good, but your accuracy gets even worse, because of course it does. Ever since patch 9.18, Wargaming have decided light tanks can't hit anything for toffee. So 0.42 becomes 0.44. I mean, good God, that is Russian 122mm derpy gun levels of terrible. Okay, let's just make that clear. That is awful. Having said that, I do recommend the upgraded gun, the M17. Yes, the accuracy is worse, but the accuracy was bad anyway. You're not really going to be sniping weak points with this gun. And the improved aim time and improved rate of fire, I do feel, are worth the trade-off. So, the gun, it gets the job done. It certainly does not let you snipe from across the map with your terrible accuracy and terrible shell velocity and decidedly penetration. But the gun does get the job done. The other thing just to quickly say about firepower here is the Chaffee does get 10 degrees of gun depression and 15 degrees of gun elevation. That 10 degrees of gun depression is very nice to have. If we have a look at the grind on this tank, it's a bit of a mixed bag. So the fully upgraded engine you won't have from any other tanks because it is unique to this tank, and you really do want that fully upgraded engine because you go from 380 horsepower to 500. That is a significant upgrade. The fully upgraded radio depends on what tanks you've played before it. You might have it already unlocked, or you might not. You don't unlock it on any of the Stuarts, so bear in mind that you do want it because 410 meter signal range is terrible, but bear in mind that yeah, you might actually have to properly unlock it. The fully upgraded gun lies after the turret. The turret itself takes the view range from a rather underwhelming 350 meters to a well, for I guess it's only tier 5, to an alright 360 meters. And the gun comes after that turret. Now, there are a couple of different ways of doing this. I would prioritise the engine as your first port of call, because as I mentioned, the stock gun on this tank is actually perfectly usable, and you may, depending, you may decide that actually you don't want to unlock the top gun ever. Because you don't have to unlock the top gun to get the T-37, and this top gun is unique to the M24 Chaffee. You don't use it again on any other vehicle. Now, I would recommend getting it. It's only 4,000 experience and 40,000 credits. It's not that much out of your way, and I do feel that it is an upgrade over the stock gun, but if you have no interest in keeping the Chaffee and you're just trying to hard grind through to the T-37 as quickly as possible, then in that situation, you might decide that you're just going to stick with the stock gun. I leave that up to you. I'm not going to talk about the higher tier grinds because they are due to be shuffling around the American light tanks anyway, so I'm not going to mention that too much. So my personal advice would be to focus on the engine first and the radio. Well, no. Yes, engine and radio, because the signal range on the stock radio is so bad that you might actually get yourself out of contact with some of your teammates. And then get the turret, and then get the gun. And pick the suspension up at some point in that mix when you need it. The suspension does give you a slightly better traverse speed, which is nice. And of course an increased load limit. But I'd get the engine before you worry about the suspension. So, in terms of crew skills, modules, equipment, and all of that jazz. So, on the crew skills, it's not going to come as a huge surprise. Sixth sense on your commander, and then really you want if this crew is just for the tank, you want your camouflage just to make yourself harder to spot. You want things like smooth ride, snapshot, clutch braking, all those things that increase your mobility and increase your ability to fire on the move. If you're planning to take this crew further up the line, I would also recommend safe stowage. While I haven't had any massive problems with the ammo rack on the M24 Chaffee myself, the later tanks in the line do have ammo rack related issues, so do bear that in mind. In particular, the M41 Walker Bulldog is notorious for going pop. So, yeah, do bear that in mind. Ammunition. I have 36 rounds of armor piercing, 10 of APCR, and 2 rounds of high explosive. The 96 penetration on the gun, while not fantastic, is generally speaking good enough, providing you are not afraid to get into people's sides and rears. And it's a light tank. If you're going to do damage, that's probably what you should be doing a lot of the time anyway. This gun is certainly not up to sniping. The high explosive, well, it's okay. And yes, you are at tier 5, so 75mm HE can be useful. However, you only get 48 rounds of ammunition on this tank, and that can start running low, especially when you've missed a load of shots because the shell velocity and accuracy suck. So I've only got 2 rounds of high explosive here, but you may decide to go for a different amount, of course. I've got the standard set of consumables. You could go for a case of cola to boost your crew skills. You could try and boost up your engine power as well, of course. You really don't want to get shot in this tank, so whilst I would keep the first aid kit and the repair kit in either their small or their large versions, you can probably forego the fire extinguisher if you wish. With all that said and done, I think it's about time we jumped into a quick look at the armor profile, followed by a little bit of gameplay. Okay then, just before looking at the armor profile itself, worth noting that, most of the modules are where you'd expect them to be. There's fuel tanks and engine that can be set on fire in the bum, a little bit in the front as well, your driver, etc. Ammo rack for this tank below the turret in the hull, which is a pretty common location, both sides of the hull, so shots there can ammo rack it, though as I mentioned, I have not personally experienced a massive problem with it, so yeah. I don't know. Not going to spend long on this because the armor on light tanks isn't really their selling point. The rear can be penetrated by high explosive. The sides can probably be penetrated by high explosive. The front, you're going to be struggling to get more than about 30 odd millimeters of effective frontal hull armor. Front of the turret, well, there's the odd region where you might be able to bounce like some 75 and under millimeter guns, but I really wouldn't be counting on it too much. Generally speaking, as I mentioned in the garage, it is only just about enough to shrug off high explosive that you find at that tier. So here we are with the first piece of gameplay. It's a tier 5 maximum match here on Ruinberg. And while I was playing it, I found the Chaffee was able to do a great many things. Winning, not particularly high up on that list, however, as perhaps you're going to see from these particular games. Anyway, c'est la vie. So, I didn't mention in the garage the equipment that I would recommend. As a tier 5 light tank, ever since patch 9.18, you can now mount a vertical stabilizer. Now with the Chaffee in particular, you might have been able to do that beforehand, I cannot remember, but certainly with other tier 5 light tanks you couldn't. So I do recommend the vertical stabilizer. I also recommend the gun rammer just for a better reload, slightly better DPM for those situations, especially when you're top tier, when you do want to be able to shoot your way out of trouble. Third equipment slot, because the view range isn't absolutely spellbinding, I have gone for binocular telescopes. I guess you could also go for vents if you so wished, or coated optics. If you're going for vents though, I would probably swap out the gun rammer for the vents and take vents and optics. It just makes you a bit more competitive in those tier 7 matches. So we tried to do a little bit of spotting here along that mid-ridge right at the beginning of the game. Haven't been able to shoot anybody yet. And that M5 Stuart seems determined to make sure that I will never be able to shoot someone in the future again. Scoreline is 1-0 as our team have managed to pick up a Largo. And we're just trying not to push our luck too much because yes, we're top tier, but you still have to remember we are a light tank. We have, not particularly spectacular health, and yes, that was a critical hit on the side of an M8A1. We only have 360 hit points. Yeah, eat some damage, and here you can see that wonderful accuracy coming into play. Leopard this time, and he's dead. Anyway, So yeah, you don't have particularly fantastic hit point pool, and of course remember your armour is god awful. So just because you're top tier, that doesn't mean you can hold down W and plough through the enemy team. You're not driving an OI experimental. Nonetheless, so far our team has picked up 3 kills, the enemy team has picked up 4, and we're just trying to see what we can do here. MAA1, let's pick up the kill on him and take his gun out of the game. 409 damage done so far, and now we can't shoot that T-34. That's a little bit of a shame. Just trying to be a bit careful here. We don't want to expose ourselves more than we have to. Use our 10 degrees of gun depression where we can. And hello, Mr. Churchill. There we go. One shot into the side of that Churchill. Doesn't look like we're going to get a second. If these guys pop out, though, I might be able to do something about them. Come on. Ah, never mind. Our artillery manages to pick up the kill on the T-34. 518 damage done at this point, which is more than we have hit points. And that's usually quite a nice indicator of what kind of game you are having. Can't easily pick out a shot on the Largo, and I decide to pull back rather than getting shot myself. Take a punt at the Crusader, but bad accuracy, bad shell velocity, that was basically not going to happen. And so I don't hit that shell. Swinging back towards the base then, we've got this Crusader and a Churchill 3 who are doing quite a lot of damage to our people in the town. I was trying to see if I could save that KV-1, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. It looks like our STVZ-39 is also going down, and I think I'm just a little bit too late to the party in order to do anything real here, although the Covenanter does get taken down. Trying to pick up some shots on this Crusader then. There we go. Really don't want that Churchill shooting us at the same time, though. Here's the wonderful accuracy on this gun. There's one shot into the Crusader, and I can't put a second in. Okay, no, let's not get shot by the Churchill 3. That was lucky to penetrate with less than 100 pen against the front of a Churchill 3. Not fully aimed or anything. That was quite fortunate, but we will take it. Largo has been spotted, but I don't have a clear shot on him. He's behind a building or something, and I'm afraid the scoreline has turned decidedly against us, as it is now 7-9, 7-10. So, gonna go and see if we can do anything about the Largo and the Key-Ho. You know, we couldn't just throw ourselves in against the Churchill in the town, and so let's just see what we can do about these fellows. One shot into the Largo, and there's another one, leaving him on, of course, 1 hit point, because why wouldn't you? There we go, we pick up the kill. Crusader shooting us in the side, which is slightly problematic. One way round that is just to go forwards. Unfortunately, we don't manage to pick up the kill on the Key-Ho, although he does eventually die. Anyway, scoreline is 9-11. Swinging round, Panzer T25 over here, and our IKV is not long for this world. And now the unfortunate thing is the Panzer T25 has a decided hit point advantage over us. This is problematic. Put one shot in, take a hit in return, put another shot in, and we manage to get ourselves behind a building. Another one into him. His turret traverse is terrible. We're able to take advantage of that, but there's a Stuart coming to do nasty things to us as well. Shot into the Panzer T25. One more to kill this guy. There we go, kill number 3. Now it's the Stuart. One into him. Now the Stuart is not a particularly good tank, although that autoloader can actually do some damage to us. And unfortunately we get taken down by an AP round, as it turns out, from the Electo, from his 25 pounder into us. And I say lucky boy there in chat, but he was firing an armor piercing round instead of a high explosive, as it turns out, so go figure. And so we're left with a Crusader, Electo, and a Panzer Souffle versus a Type T34 and an M37. I'm just going to speed this along a little bit so you can see the end of this game, but I don't want it to take too long. Type T34 manages to get himself killed by the Crusader, who then goes on to also kill the artillery, and that is the match. It didn't take too long. So, let's go and have a look at the post-battle stats for this one. So that game ended up being good enough for Fire for Effect, First Class Mastery, and a High Caliber medal. 1,609 damage done, 3 kills, 548 base experience. Unfortunately, that was more damage than anyone else in the game. We still lost though. 22 shots fired, 18 hits, 17 penetrations. For that damage count, 4 hits received, most of them penetrated. One actually failed to penetrate. We managed to get 75 damage, blocked by our armour, which feels like a 6-pounder gun or something. 8 enemy vehicles damaged, 3 of them destroyed, 178 assistance damage, almost 3 kilometres travelled, 18,500 credits made in a, 7-minute match? So that wasn't too bad for us, just not able to pull a win out of the bag for that one, unfortunately. One tier 7 match later then. So, as usual, we've got a bottom tier game to round off the gameplay section of the video. We're here in an assault match on Durpenberg. And, well, yeah, we're just going to see what we can do. Now, as ever, on Durpenberg, not going to go down the 1 and 2 lines as a member of the defending team. Generally speaking, it tends to get you killed very, very quickly. And so you can see already, having looked at the map, that a prediction, our team is already 1, 2, 3 tanks down just right from the off, as the IKV, M6 and Grilla all cross the river. Maybe I'm going to be wrong in this particular case, we shall see, but more often than not, if you're going to go to the other side of the river, you just end up dead. So we're trying to spot some people out right at the beginning here. There's a T-150 over there. Going to try and use these bushes to spot whomsoever we can. Hello, Mr. T-150. I'm not going to shoot him, partly because my gun's penetration is a bit lacking, but also because I don't want to get spotted and I'd really like to pick up the assistance damage. I'm actually picking up half the assistance damage. I'm not the only one doing the spotting, and I do get spotted out for my troubles, which is a little bit unfortunate, but there we go. But we're up to 175 assistance damage as it is at the moment. Although already we are 1-3 down, and that is not including the people over yonder on the other side of the map who have crossed the river. Trying to put a shot into some of those people, but it just isn't working. There's a little bit more assistance damage for us on the T-34 this time. E25 seems to be deciding to relocate. Can't really say I blame him, and I can't punish him for it either, which is a little unfortunate. No, not going to happen. KV-1S also don't really want to fire, don't want to be spotted here. There's an AMX ELC, need to be wary of him, but just trying to spot these guys, and whoa, he died. Fantastic. Over 640 assistance damage to date, which is nice. T-150 is still down there to my right-hand side. Really need to be careful about him. Pull back, pull back, pull back. Have a shot into him. I bounce. He misses. And that's probably the game's way of telling me to be somewhere else. Scoreline is now 4-4, by the way. So we managed to pull some kills back. 4-5, 4-6. And the IKV and the M6 who went on the other side of the river are now both dead. It's just such a shame no one was able to predict that happening. Oh well, never mind. Our Grilla doesn't really seem to be taking the hint there, and he's still the other side of the river as well. He has an engine and WASD keys. It would be really good for him if he used them before the enemy IKV, you know, gets him murdered. So, E25 there, being engaged by our Leo. Our Leo has managed to set him, well, he hasn't set himself on fire, but he has been set on fire. I'm moving forward to try and give the Leo a hand, because if we can take down this E25, that would be great, and if we can't, well, the problem is we've now got a tier 7 committing a top tier tank onto them, and we really don't want him to die for it. So we're able to put a couple of shots into that artillery piece, and the Leo finishes him off. Is the E25 still over here? We're about to find out. Trying to be a little cautious with what we're doing here. Our team is unfortunately wilting, and we have light tanks camping up in A0, which is always an encouraging course of events. I have been spotted, so the E25 is still around here, but if that Leo's not going to engage, I'm not going to, because the E25 in a one-on-one engagement would murderize me in the face. So instead, just going back to base, seeing what I can do. I get spotted out for my troubles, which is a little bit annoying, though not necessarily hugely surprising. And I don't really have the gun to take on an IS-2 frontally with any reliability. Nonetheless, our E25 manages to take out the AMX ELC BIS, and I decide to put myself in a position from which I can spot. Now, to be fair, earlier on I was probably being a little bit harsh towards the 5916. What he's trying to do is be in a bush where he can spot the enemies to allow the Nashorn, Sturra Emil and E25 to therefore shoot them. He has decided to relocate, so I am instead going to be on bush duty. As I said, my gun isn't really up to snuff here, but my gun doesn't have to be up to snuff. Their guns are up to snuff, I just need to be able to spot these fellas. That E25 is still bothering me on the enemy team, of course, but honestly at this point there isn't a vast amount we can do about it. Bit of a shame, but yeah, there's reality. Trying to get some shots in on the IS-2, and there's the E25. Oh dear. Have a shot at him, put one through the front of his tank. Hopefully I haven't been spotted. The IS-2 view range isn't fantastic. I spot out the enemy artillery, their Burt as well. And there's only the three of us left now. E25, myself, and a Sturra Emil. This is a little bit on the messy side. So I'm spotting the IS-2, who seems to have poked his face up. Someone manages to do some damage, and I'm rewarded with a bit of assistance damage on that IS-2, and trying to do something about this IKV, but it just isn't happening. Oh, flat side. Yay! Damages. Hurrah! That one misses. And no, that's not happening anymore. Come on. Oh, spotted a Sturra Emil as well. Come on, guys. Shoot these fellas. Oh, and now I've got an E25 who wants me dead. I am not going to be long for this world. There was artillery. There's my tracks. There's my corpse. And that just leaves the E25 and the Sturra Emil. That was kind of a sense of inevitability to that. Wasn't a huge amount we could do about it, but there we go. Just going to speed this along a little bit so you get to see the E25 circle our Sturra Emil to death. And then try and ram him for some unknown reason, but they are rewarded with the kill in the end, and that is the match. Another defeat then, but at least we managed to get our first mark of excellence in that particular game, and the Fire for Effect ribbon as well. Finished third on our team by experience done with 446 of our own damage, 293 base experience, and a shout out should probably go to the enemy E25, almost 3k damage. He basically beat the stuffing out of us, long story short. 1,354 assistance damage, which is where a lot of our experience for that match came from. Just shy of 7-minute match, and just shy of 12,000 credits profit. So there we go, that is the gameplay. Let's just jump back into the garage to round things out. So, my final thoughts on the M24 Chaffee. This is a little bit of an odd one. Way back in the dawny mists of time, when the Chaffee used to be tier 5, well it still is, but was tier 5 and saw tier 10 matches, had that big fat bobblehead, and kind of looked a bit like the T-37, I found it a great fun tank. I wasn't amazingly good in it, but I had a lot of fun in it, and it was a keeper for me. Then, they removed the bobblehead, and we got this, which is more historically accurate, but I didn't enjoy it as much. I found the degradation of the gun disappointing. The tank, while faster, didn't accelerate or turn as well. You know, little things like that. It wasn't the dogfighter it used to be, and I very much fell out of love with the Chaffee. Patch 9.18 came around, changed the tank again. Aesthetically it looked the same, and it had many of the same modules, but they did make some changes to it. And overall I feel that the mobility got a bit of a buff. The gun, because of the better matchmaking, got a bit of a buff, even if the accuracy did get hit in the face. And once again, I actually enjoyed the Chaffee. Did I enjoy it enough to be keeping this tank? Well, no. I am going to be moving my crew further up the American light tank line. We're not staying with the Chaffee, but it's a fairly decent little tier 5 light tank. And actually, with the death of the AMX ELC, you may wish to choose the Chaffee as your tier 5 light tank. If you want a tier 5 light tank, I mean, if we have a look at the options there are, you've got the Chaffee and the M7. The M7 is generally considered to be decidedly So you might want to opt for the Chaffee. The Leopard, the German Leopard at tier 5, I was never a huge fan of, but I guess you could go with if you wanted to. The T50, the Soviet one, I know it's been changed, but again, I'm not necessarily a huge fan. AMX ELC, as I already mentioned, has been murdered. The Brits don't get one. The Chinese don't get one. The Japanese don't get one, and neither do the Czechoslovakians or the Swedes. So, if you're looking for a tier 5 light tank, actually, I think the M24 Chaffee is probably the best of the bunch. But for me, I'm not going to bother. If I wanted to play a mid-tier light tank, I'd much rather jump into the T21 at tier 6 and play that instead. But that's just my own personal feelings. The Chaffee is certainly not a bad tank or a painful tank to play. So there we go. I hope you guys enjoyed that review, possibly found it vaguely informative. If you did, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel. And as ever, I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao ciao.